Making coffee blends is one of the huge joys of learning about good quality coffee, whether you're picking up single origin beans to combine or whether you're home roasting or as part of a coffee business. Now, this method was taught to me at a cafe seminar here in Tokyo, and I'm really excited to share with you a solid process for mixing your own coffee blends at home. Let's get into it. So let's start off with sourcing good coffee beans. Now, I get all of my green coffee beans from an importer here in Tokyo, but wherever you get your green beans from, make sure that you find good information on the farm, moisture content, density, and elevation that the coffee was grown at. These things are really hard to test for at home, and the tools to do so are very expensive. Some importers or roasters will have very specific flavors listed as things that you can expect to find in that coffee, but I always take this with a pinch of salt because a lot of them exaggerate their claims a little bit for marketing purposes. You can make a blend with any coffee beans, and they don't even have to come from different countries. Actually, in my video about cafes in Shibuya, the guys at Camelback told me that their blend had 2 different Brazilian beans in it to create a rich and sweet base, so it's good to experiment with off-the-wall ideas. So first, I roast at least 2 and a maximum of 5 different coffee beans to a medium roast at about the level I like, which is just past the first crack. I'll get enough cups lined up and extract each of these coffees individually and put them side by side. You can do this with French press, pour over, or Chemex, whatever your normal extraction method is. Then the fun part starts. I try each of the coffees individually, and I use my cupping chart, which you can find on my website for free, to check the taste and keep a record. So then I'm thinking about how can I combine these flavors to make an interesting blend. For example, the Brazilian one has a really chocolatey, rich flavor, and the Ethiopian one is more earthy and fruity. So I think maybe if I combine them together, I'll get that nice chocolatey flavor from the Brazilian and that blueberry sort of flavor from the Ethiopian. So I'm going to put them in a mix of about 50-50 and see how the taste is. So for this one, the mix isn't working as well as I'd hoped. I'm getting a little bit too much acidity from the Ethiopian, and then not enough of that sweetness and body from the Brazilian. So I'm going to readjust these to an 8:2 ratio and try again. Oh, that's much better. Okay, so this was much better, and so I'm going to take some of those roasted coffee beans and mix them together in an 8:2 ratio for the final blend. I'll talk a little bit more later about an alternative way for doing this when you're roasting. Before you roast, you can mix the green beans together, but for now, let's move on to espresso blends. A lot of my favorite espresso blends have 3 or more different coffee beans. It's a little harder to find a good balance because the more different kinds of beans you mix together, the more difficult it is to find that good balance. I recommend never going below about 10% for any one origin of coffee, as below this point you're unlikely to taste anything in particular. There are of course some templates that people use to decide which beans and flavors to put together so they aren't starting from scratch every time. I can't say this strongly enough, but these are guidelines, not rules. You should definitely go with what flavors excite you and blend in an interesting way. You might just discover a delicious blend of coffee that you can really enjoy that surprises you. The most common template I see for espresso is usually a combination of 3 different notes. There's a base, a mid-tone, and a high note. So the base is usually a mellower, sweet kind of coffee. So you might expect something like a Brazilian, a Mexican, or a Colombian coffee that's roasted at large scale. Now these are really tasty coffees, but usually nothing too out of the ordinary. Then you have the mid-tones. The mid-tones will be something that is a little bit stronger in flavor, something a little bit more unique, as it's going to provide most of the flavor of the coffee and usually is the largest proportion of your blend. That'll be something like a Costa Rican or a Guatemalan coffee that tastes like stone fruits. Then the high notes come, and that's going to be something that's maybe a little bit more acidic, a sharper or more unique flavor, like an Ethiopian coffee that tastes like blueberries. This will provide some really interesting flavor without overpowering an espresso with high acidity. Usually I'll first try new espresso blends in a 20-60-20 ratio, with the mid-tone being the highest proportion of the blend and the base and high tones being smaller parts. Of course, you are going to change this once you've tried the mix, but this is usually a good place to start. I'm trying to get a nice blend of 3 coffees I have here: a Brazilian, a Costa Rican, and an Ethiopian coffee. The Brazilian is the base chocolatey note, Costa Rican for that tasty honey mid-tone, and the Ethiopian for that sharp blueberry high note. It's a nice coffee, but I feel like I can do more with this. So if you're tasting some of the flavors that you want, now is the time to adjust and try to pull out more of the flavors that you want and reduce the ones that you don't. I'm gonna adjust this and get more of that base note from the Brazilian and reduce the Costa Rican, which has kind of an overpowering flavor that reduces the ability to taste the other two coffees. So I'll keep the Ethiopian in that 20% range because I am getting a little bit of that nice sharpness and fruity flavor, and I'll just get the Costa Rican and Brazilian into equal balance at about 40% each. That's so much better than last time. So I think this is a pretty good espresso blend. I'm gonna keep it at this ratio. I might play around with this a little bit more at another time, but for now I'll put the coffee beans in the right ratio together. Make sure that when you put them in the jar, you swirl that jar around and mix up those coffee beans so you don't end up with one of the flavors being more pronounced because it's on top. If you want to roast your coffee beans together, you should put the green beans mix together in a container for at least a day or two so the moisture levels in the beans can equalize a bit more. This will help you to get a more even roast with beans that come from different places and are likely to have different densities and moisture content. It's not going to be as even as if you carefully roasted 3 coffees to the same level, but it is easier to prepare, reduces the amount of time you spend roasting, and the amount of coffee you need to roast. This is especially helpful on some home roasting setups that don't have as much capacity, take longer to roast coffee, and are more inconsistent than a drum roaster in a proper roastery. So that's how I roast and blend my coffee at home. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like as this helps me to reach more people with my channel, and let me know in the comments below what was the best blend you ever tasted. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. How's that? I need to be a little bit higher, or I could drop the camera a little bit lower. Much better. I'm gonna adjust this and get a little bit more flavor from the base Brazilian coffee and reduce the Costa Rican? That's not a word. What's the light? The reflection on my lenses. That's not good. So don't look left. Right's okay. Left is like anime. Swing, 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 swing. Wow, that's actually perfectly precise. Well done, Charles.